The bank hummed with the quiet arrogance of money old enough to forget where it came from, its staff trained to measure worth in tailored suits and familiar last names. He sat there, black, plainly dressed, holding nothing but a worn folder no one bothered to read. Conversations lowered when they noticed him, polite smiles stiffened, eyes flicked over him and moved on as if he were a clerical error waiting to be corrected. No one imagined the weight behind those unassuming papers, the authority they would be forced to acknowledge too late. It wasn't the size of the deal that would ruin them. It was that he never raised his voice while they exposed themselves completely. If this sounds like a reckoning you want to see unfold, be sure to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Have you ever seen someone misjudge everything that mattered about you? Ellison Tate pushed open the thick glass door of Prescott & Meyer Wealth Management with a cautious hand, the muted chime overhead startling him slightly as it announced his arrival. Inside, the lobby was chilled, designed to impress and intimidate with its glossy marble floors, dark mahogany accents, and carefully placed abstract art that screamed expensive. The scent of leather chairs and polished wood mixed with the faint cologne of men who believed they owned the world. Ellison stood there for a moment, feeling out of place in his plain gray button-down and worn khakis. His loafers were scuffed, but they were clean. He'd polished them that morning, determined to look respectable even if not flashy. He clutched a slim folder to his chest, containing neatly organized papers outlining the deal he'd spent years putting together. But the receptionist didn't even glance up at first, tapping idly at her keyboard as if he were part of the furniture. He cleared his throat gently. She looked up slowly, expression flat. "Yes," she said, not bothering to hide her boredom. Ellison tried to keep his voice level. "Good morning. I have a 10 o'clock appointment with Mr. Prescott." She tapped a few keys with deliberate slowness before raising a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "Name." He adjusted his grip on the folder. "Ellison Tate." She gave him a once-over that was more inventory than greeting. Her lips pressed into a thin line before she gestured stiffly at a row of cold leather chairs. "Wait over there. He'll be with you when he's ready." Ellison sat carefully, folding his hands over his folder to stop them from fidgeting. The silence in the room felt cavernous, broken only by the tick of a modern, oversized wall clock. Photos of Calvin Prescott shaking hands with powerful people lined the walls, each frame a subtle warning that you needed to be someone to belong here. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Ellison felt the receptionist's gaze on him occasionally, as if checking that he hadn't stolen anything. He could feel the warmth leaving his face as the seconds stretched, his mouth dry. He reminded himself to be patient. This was important. He'd practiced every word. At 10:18, the door finally swung open. A junior banker in an immaculate suit peered out. "Mr. Tate." Ellison jerked up, smoothing his shirt as he clutched his folder tighter. "Yes, that's me." The young man didn't introduce himself, just turned, motioning silently for Ellison to follow. The hallway was hushed, with plush carpet muffling their steps, the only sound the distant murmur of other meetings where real money was being moved. Ellison felt the eyes of bankers following him as he passed. He kept his chin up. They reached the door with Calvin Prescott's name on a brass plaque. The junior banker knocked once, opened the door halfway without waiting for an answer, and gestured, "Go in." He didn't bother to follow. Ellison stepped into the office, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it was audible. The room was designed to dominate. A massive mahogany desk sat in front of a wall of windows overlooking the city skyline. Shelves lined with leather-bound books and awards filled the space. Prescott didn't stand to greet him, didn't even look up at first. He sat behind the desk, inspecting something in his hands, a Mont-Blanc pen, turning it slowly between manicured fingers. Ellison cleared his throat. "Mr. Prescott?" Prescott finally looked up, face settling into a practiced, chilly smile. He let his gaze travel slowly from Ellison's face to his scuffed shoes and back up, eyes lingering on the frayed cuffs of his shirt. "Mr. Tate, is it?" His tone dripped false politeness. "Yes, sir. Thank you for seeing me." Prescott didn't invite him to sit. Ellison hovered awkwardly, shifting his weight. Prescott raised an eyebrow, finally making a tiny dismissive motion with his pen. "Sit, if you must." Ellison sat, placing the folder on his lap like a shield. He could feel sweat pooling at the base of his spine. "I appreciate your time. I think you'll find this proposal very compelling. I'm representing a group interested in a strategic investment partnership." Prescott's eyes glimmered with amusement. "Compelling," he repeated, voice lilting like he was testing the word for the first time. He didn't take the folder. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, tapping the pen slowly on the desk. "You sure you're in the right place?" Ellison blinked. I'm sorry?" Prescott's smirk widened, eyes narrowing like a snake sizing up prey. He spoke deliberately louder. "This is our premier investment suite, Mr. Tate. We work with real investors here, people who don't just dream, but can actually make things happen." Ellison felt his face burn. He swallowed hard. "I can assure you we have the means. I wouldn't waste your time if I weren't certain." Prescott chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "Right, because everyone says that. Let's not waste time. Why don't you tell me exactly how much you think you're ready to invest?" Ellison steadied his breath. "We're talking about a $6.3 billion partnership, fully documented." Prescott blinked once, then laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. Prescott hadn't moved much, but his chair was angled just slightly to the side now, his elbow propped lazily on the armrest, that same smug smirk on his face. He gestured for Ellison to sit again. "Have a seat, Mr. Tate. Let's continue this fascinating discussion." Ellison sank back into the chair, tightening his grip on the folder until the paper edges bit into his palm. "Thank you," he managed to croak, voice strained. Prescott didn't acknowledge the gratitude. He picked up his pen and began tapping it against his desk slowly, rhythmically, eyes fixed on Ellison with clinical disinterest. "So," he said, drawing out the word like he was savoring it, "tell me again about this little plan of yours." Ellison tried to ignore the condescension, to focus on the facts. He cleared his throat. "As I mentioned, sir, I represent a group looking to establish a strategic partnership, with capital in excess of $6 billion. Prescott interrupted with a loud, dismissive snort, waving his pen like a baton. "Fascinating. Really." He didn't look at Ellison, so much as through him, like he was a particularly dull exhibit in a museum. $6 billion? Truly? And how much of that are you personally bringing in? A few hundred? Maybe 1,000 if you check your couch cushions." He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he looked over Ellison's shoulder at the glass walls that faced the rest of the floor, eyes finding his junior associates milling around. He raised his voice deliberately, ensuring they could hear every word. "We get all kinds in here, don't we?" he called out, chuckling low in his throat. "Some people really think they're going to waltz in here with a grand plan and leave with the keys to the kingdom. It's adorable, really." Ellison felt the words punch through his chest. Heat burned in his ears. He tried to speak, mouth opening and closing once before any sound emerged. "I'm not here to waste your time," he said hoarsely, his voice cracking in spite of himself. Prescott's smirk only widened. "Oh, I'm sure you're not," he replied silkily. "I'm sure you're dead serious." Which is the funniest part. The sincerity is just precious. He said the word like it was poison on his tongue. He turned back to the glass wall, rapping his knuckles against it for effect. A few bankers outside glanced up from their desks. He gestured with his pen at Ellison like he was pointing out a zoo animal. "This is what I mean when I say we need better screening. We don't want to waste our resources on this nonsense. Let's save this suite for actual clients who can, deliver." Ellison's throat constricted. The junior associates outside chuckled quietly, clearly enjoying the show. He could see one of them mouthing something to the other, though he couldn't make out the words. He didn't want to. His palms were slick with sweat now, the folder slipping slightly as he struggled to maintain his grip. Prescott let the silence stretch a moment, letting the humiliation settle into the room like heavy smoke. Then he clicked his tongue thoughtfully. "Tell you what," he continued in a falsely generous tone. "Why don't you save us both the embarrassment? Just tell me now what your real budget is. Be honest with yourself. There's no shame in being small. Some people dream big. Some people should dream smaller. That's not an insult, Mr. Tate. That's just sound advice. Ellison felt his stomach twist. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He heard muffled laughter from the reception area behind him, the junior associates cracking jokes at his expense. He wanted to leave the building and disappear into the street, but something deep in his gut forced him to turn around. He couldn't just walk away. He had to at least try one more time. He swallowed the bile rising in his throat and walked slowly back to the heavy office door, hesitating only a second before knocking softly. From inside, Calvin Prescott's voice floated out with feigned surprise and cold delight. "Oh, back so soon." Ellison forced himself to step in. Prescott didn't stand or greet him. He didn't even try to hide his contempt. He just raised one eyebrow and flicked his eyes at the crumpled folder in Ellison's hands. "Did you forget something?" Ellison cleared his throat and tried to force the tremor out of his voice. "Mr. Prescott, please. If you'll just look at the documentation. It's all here. The contracts, the commitments, the signed letters of intent. It's not a joke. It's real." He tried to straighten the folder, smoothing the creases desperately with his palm before setting it on the desk and pushing it forward. Prescott didn't even glance at it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair with a sigh of exaggerated patience, folding his arms over his expensive suit. He glanced pointedly at the folder, then back up at Ellison's anxious face. "Put that away," he said flatly, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "We don't need to waste anyone's time with monopoly money." Ellison flinched as if he'd been slapped. He stood frozen for a second, mouth half open, hands shaking at his sides. He tried again, voice cracking slightly. "Please, sir, just look at it. It's all there. It's legitimate." Prescott shook his head slowly, that smirk never leaving his face. "I'm trying to help you here, Mr. Tate," he said, his tone taking on the condescending patience of someone explaining a simple concept to a child. "Honestly, I'm doing you a favor. This isn't the kind of deal for folks like you." He let the words hang in the air, heavy with cruel meaning. Ellison felt the blood drain from his face. His ears rang. He knew exactly what Prescott meant. He knew he wasn't talking about small investors. He was talking about him, about his clothes, his skin, his background. He felt every eye on him from the glass wall outside as junior bankers pretended not to watch too openly but kept their ears tuned for the next humiliation. He swallowed hard, trying not to let his voice crack. "It's not about me. It's about the deal. It's about the numbers." Prescott chuckled, shaking his head like he was genuinely amused. "The numbers? You think numbers matter here? Look around you." He swept one hand lazily to indicate the grand office, the expensive furnishings, the entire institution built on gatekeeping. "This is about credibility, Mr. Tate. About reputation. About trust. And with all due respect," he added, leaning forward slightly and lowering his voice to a poisonous whisper, "you don't have it." Ellison's knees felt weak. He tried to find the words to defend himself, to explain his background, the due diligence he'd done, the months of negotiation and coordination with partners who trusted him. But the words wouldn't come. They caught in his throat like barbed wire. Prescott wasn't even listening. He was glancing at his watch now, sighing theatrically, making sure Ellison knew exactly how little his time was worth. Finally, Prescott clicked his tongue and straightened in his chair. "Listen," he said with mock kindness. "You seem like an earnest enough guy. Really. But this is out of your league. Why don't you take my advice and try something more achievable? A local branch, maybe. Or an online platform with those little apps that help you save your spare change." He grinned, knowing exactly how belittling it sounded. Ellison's vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. He stood there shaking, every muscle in his body telling him to run, but something in his heart too stubborn to move. Prescott's expression hardened. He flicked his eyes to the door. "Well, are you going to make me call security? Because I will." Ellison flinched again and finally turned, grabbing the abused folder and clutching it to his chest like a life preserver in a storm. He didn't dare look back as he stumbled toward the door. Prescott's voice followed him out, soft and mocking, a final dagger. "Be realistic next time, Mr. Tate. The banker sat back in his oversized leather chair, tapping his gold pen against the polished mahogany desk with infuriating calm. He didn't bother looking at Ellison, addressing him instead with a languid wave of his hand, like shooing away an unwanted animal. "You're still here? I thought you'd have taken the hint." Ellison opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself, fingers tightening around his battered folder until the corners dug into his palm. He willed himself not to tremble, to at least appear composed. But the adrenaline from humiliation made his muscles spasm and his knees lock painfully. Prescott finally flicked his eyes up, making a show of noticing the folder. He raised an eyebrow, dripping disdain. "Oh, you're still clutching that thing? You really think waving papers around changes anything?" Ellison licked his dry lips. "I have partners waiting on this. It's legitimate. It's real." Prescott made a dramatic sigh, letting the room fill with it, shaking his head like a disappointed teacher. Then he twisted slightly in his chair, turning toward the wide glass wall that faced the lobby. Through the tinted pane, a half-dozen junior bankers were visible, pretending to work but very obviously watching, pens frozen over their notepads. Prescott's voice lifted so they could all hear, every word hitting Ellison like a slap. "Elaine," he called sing-song but sharp. The receptionist jumped, startled, and scurried to the door. "Yes, Mr. Prescott?" she asked, eyes flicking nervously to Ellison. Prescott didn't even bother lowering his voice. "Be a dear and grab our guest the brochure for starter accounts, would you? Maybe the one for high schoolers. I think it's more in line with his investment goals." Elaine's eyes went wide, darting from Prescott's lazy smirk to Ellison's mortified expression. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Prescott snapped his fingers. "Now please." She jumped and hurried off, leaving Ellison frozen in the doorway. A choke sound caught in Ellison's throat, too small and wounded to be a real protest. He felt every eye on him through the glass wall, saw the smirks and the forced neutral expressions that only deepened the shame. He forced himself to say something, anything. "Mr. Prescott, that's unnecessary." "I'm not." But Prescott cut him off with a sharp, disgusted laugh, standing now for the first time. He was taller than Ellison, broader, and he used every inch of that height to loom over him. He spoke loudly, every syllable meant to be overheard by the staff outside. "Relax, Mr. Tate. There's no shame in knowing your limits." His grin was wolfish, teeth bared in false friendliness. "We have to protect people from their own bad ideas, don't we?" Ellison's mouth worked soundlessly, his voice cracking when he finally forced words out. "You don't understand. I'm serious. This isn't enough." Prescott's voice went flat and cold. He took a single step forward, closing the space between them, his breath ghosting over Ellison's face. He dropped his voice to a venomous whisper that still somehow carried. "I'm not going to let you turn this place into your little fantasy pitch session. I have actual clients with actual money to see today." Ellison's eyes stung, blinking rapidly to keep tears at bay. His breath hitched in humiliation, but Prescott was relentless. He straightened and clapped Ellison on the shoulder hard enough to make him flinch. "Don't take it personally," he said, the words soaked in insincerity. "We have standards here. Always have." Outside the glass, a few of the younger bankers pretended to shuffle papers but didn't hide their smirks. Elaine returned, holding a garishly colored pamphlet labeled Starter Savings for Teens. She paused at the door, clearly horrified at being made a part of it. But Prescott waved her forward. "Go on," he encouraged with a shark-like grin. "Give it to our guest. Help him out." Ellison stared at the brochure like it was on fire, refusing to take it, fingers twitching with the urge to rip it to shreds. But he didn't move, couldn't move. Prescott let out an exasperated sigh. "Suit yourself." He took it from Elaine's trembling hand and tossed it on the floor at Ellison's feet with deliberate contempt. "You can pick it up on your way out." Ellison flinched as the thin paper skittered across the marble, face burning so hot he thought he might faint. But he didn't bend to pick up, couldn't bear to. Prescott clapped his hands once, loudly, making Ellison flinch again. "Meeting's over. Don't let the door hit you. I've been more than patient." He stayed standing, looming just enough to make it clear who had the power in the room. He crossed his arms and gave Ellison a long, hard stare, the kind reserved for roaches caught in the kitchen at midnight. "You know," he said slowly, voice silky but razor-edged, "presentation matters. Our real investors don't come in here dressed like they're applying for a busboy position." Ellison flinched visibly at the words, his eyes flicking down to his plain khakis and scuffed loafers, clothes that were clean but simple, functional, chosen with care, but obviously cheap in this world of tailored suits and polished Italian leather. He felt every seam of his shirt turn to sandpaper against his skin. He opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat and died before they could make sound. Prescott smirked at the silence, his lip curling in victory. He made a show of straightening his cuffs and brushing invisible lint off his jacket sleeve. "This is a bank, Mr. Tate," he continued, voice rising just enough to ensure it carried through the glass wall to the watching staff outside. "Not a charity. We don't have time to entertain pipe dreams from people who can't even bother to look the part." Ellison's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, trying desperately to find something to say that would salvage even a shred of dignity. I have the documentation, the commitments. The partnership is real. If you just look," Prescott snorted, a derisive, cruel sound. He cut Ellison off with a sharp, slicing gesture of his hand. "Don't insult my intelligence." His words cracked through the air like a whip. "I know a fantasy when I see one. Do you think just anyone can waltz in here with a sad little folder and say they're handling billions? Do you think we're stupid?" Ellison felt his face go hot, a flush crawling up his neck to the tips of his ears. He blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears welling in his eyes fall in front of this man. His fingers dug into the folder so hard that the paper inside creaked in protest. Prescott's smile thinned to a hard, cruel line. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice to a low, venomous hiss that only Ellison could hear. "You want me to be honest?" he asked, voice so quiet it was almost conspiratorial. "You don't belong here. Not in this office. Not in this building. Not in this world." Ellison's breath caught in his throat. He felt like he was drowning on dry land. His chest rose and fell in ragged bursts, but no words came out. He couldn't even muster the strength to protest. He could see himself reflected in the polished glass walls behind Prescott, a man small and out of place in a world designed to keep him out. Prescott straightened, satisfied with the devastation he saw in Ellison's eyes. He turned slightly toward the door, voice snapping back to its performative brightness, ensuring the staff outside heard every word. "Elaine," he called, eyes never leaving Ellison's. "Can you please make sure our guest finds his way out? I think we're done wasting time today." He looked back at Ellison, his eyes glittering with triumph. He wanted to speak, to argue, to throw the folder at Prescott's desk and demand he look at it, but his arms felt like lead, and his mouth wouldn't form the words. Prescott let the silence hang for a moment before setting the phone down with a decisive click, turning back to Ellison with a look of utter boredom, as if Ellison were some persistent stain that refused to come out. He slowly rose from his chair, deliberately straightening the sleeves of his expensive suit. He was taller than Ellison, broader, and he used every inch of that advantage now, looming over the shorter man. "You're done here," he said, each word clipped and cold, like he was talking to a misbehaving child. "I won't have you wasting space meant for my actual clients." Ellison's jaw worked, his tongue dry and heavy. He tried to force something out, but all that escaped was a low, choked rasp. He hated himself for it, hated the burning in his eyes that threatened to spill over in front of this man. Prescott's lip curled, amused at the spectacle of Ellison's silence, of his breathless, defeated shaking. He slowly leaned forward just enough that Ellison could see the fine lines in his sneer, the absolute satisfaction in his eyes at having crushed him so completely. "You don't belong here," he repeated softly, voice dripping with the satisfaction of total domination. Then, loud enough for the staff outside the glass wall to hear clearly, he snapped his fingers once, sharp as a whip crack. "Elaine." The receptionist appeared instantly at the door, her eyes darting nervously between her boss and the wilted man in front of his desk. Prescott didn't even look at her. He kept his gaze locked on Ellison like a predator that had cornered its prey. "Call security," he said evenly. No hint of emotion in his voice beyond the slight curl of cruelty at the edges. "I want him escorted out. And make sure he doesn't loiter in the lobby scaring people away." Elaine blanched at the command, hesitating just a fraction of a second, as if even she thought it was too much. But the look Prescott shot her had her scuttling away in a heartbeat to do his bidding. Ellison felt something in him snap at those words, scaring people away, like he was some vagrant, some threat to their precious image of polished glass and safe, wealthy clientele. His vision swam. He clenched the folder, so hard the papers inside buckled and ripped. His mouth opened, breath rattling in his chest, but he still couldn't find words. Prescott gave a small, satisfied exhale through his nose, eyes half-lidded in contempt. He turned his back completely, dismissing Ellison like he wasn't even human. "I don't have time for this nonsense," he said to no one in particular, reaching for his pen and flipping it in his fingers like a bored aristocrat. He didn't look back even once. The office door opened behind Ellison with a quiet snick, and two uniformed security guards stepped in, wearing identical polite but firm expressions, their eyes flicking over Ellison's slumped shoulders and tear-bright eyes before settling into practiced indifference. One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us." Ellison flinched at the word "sir," the mock respect of it almost worse than outright insults. He tried to swallow the thick knot in his throat, failing, making a low strangled sound instead. His knees felt weak, threatening to buckle, but he somehow forced himself to straighten slightly, the last shreds of pride screaming not to fall apart completely. His vision blurred as humiliation burned hot behind his eyes, and every breath was ragged with the effort to stay silent. He heard one of the guards mutter under his breath, something like "let's make this quick," and felt another pang in his chest that made it almost hard to keep walking. But he didn't resist. He didn't speak. Not yet. When they reached the wide glass doors of the bank's lobby, the guard on his left reached forward to pull one open. Sunlight spilled across the marble floor in a wide streak of warmth that felt alien against Ellison's cold skin. It should have been the end. It should have been the moment he let them dump him on the sidewalk so they could get back to business as usual, so they could sweep his presence away like dust and forget it had ever happened. But something in him finally refused to stay silent. His spine straightened a fraction. He drew in a breath that trembled but didn't break. Just before they shoved him fully outside, Ellison stopped walking. The guards jolted at the sudden halt, one of them frowning. "Sir, let's keep moving," he said, voice firm with manufactured courtesy. But Ellison didn't move. He slowly turned his head, just enough to look over his shoulder back into the lobby. His gaze found Calvin Prescott standing in the middle of the floor, arms folded, watching the spectacle with cold satisfaction and smug finality, that same cruel smirk playing on his lips like he'd already moved on. The lobby fell silent, the buzzing pretense of work evaporating, the air heavy with the shared knowledge that something had changed. Ellison swallowed once, hard, forcing the tremor from his voice as he spoke, clear enough to carry across the hushed room. "Funny," he said, voice low but even, each syllable carefully measured. "I thought you'd be more prepared for today's meeting." Prescott's smirk faltered, eyes narrowing with sudden irritation at the audacity of a man who should have been gone and silent. "Excuse me," he snapped, voice sharp enough to crack glass. Ellison didn't flinch this time. He slowly shifted his folder, still crumpled and battered from his grip, but unbowed. He opened it with careful deliberateness, the guards' hands hovering uncertainly as they watched, unsure if they should intervene. He drew out a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper, bearing an embossed seal at the top, the ink dark and unmistakably official even from a distance. He didn't hold it up like a desperate plea this time. He didn't offer it like a supplicant. He simply turned slightly, just enough that Prescott could see the company letterhead, the signatures gleaming with authority, and the series of numbers typed in crisp black ink. $6.3 billion. The hush in the lobby turned electric. No one even pretended to type anymore. The receptionist's mouth fell open slightly as she read the figure upside down from behind her desk. The junior bankers, who had been laughing minutes ago, leaned forward in their chairs, eyes wide, breath caught in their throats. Prescott's face drained of color. His mouth opened once, but no sound came out, his eyes darting between Ellison's impassive expression and the letter that was suddenly more real than anything he'd said all morning. Ellison's voice was calm, steady now with the surety that came from years of planning, from countless nights of worry and work that no one here had ever seen. "This," he said softly but firmly, "is the authorization to finalize a $6.3 billion partnership with this bank on behalf of an international conglomerate." The receptionist's fingers hovered over her keyboard, trembling slightly as if she was unsure whether to keep pretending to work or just stare. In the middle of this suspended silence, a voice cut through, sharp with urgency, but warm with familiarity. "Mr. Tate." Ellison turned, and so did everyone else, as the tall figure of Robert Kimball, the bank's regional director, strode in through the glass doors so quickly they nearly slammed behind him. He was breathless but determined, tight, askew from the rush, eyes scanning the scene until they found Ellison. Relief flooded his expression. He practically shoved past the dumbstruck security guards to get to Ellison, hand extended before he'd even stopped moving. "Mr. Tate," he repeated, grasping Ellison's hand in a tight, genuine shake that left no doubt about the respect behind it. "We've been waiting for you. I cannot tell you how deeply sorry I am for this." Ellison's posture relaxed a hair, but he didn't lose the guarded steel in his eyes. He returned the handshake firmly, letting the apology hang in the air, making sure everyone in the lobby heard it and understood it. Around them, the staff began to stir, glancing at one another, some looking away in shame, others staring openly at the transformation of the man they'd just watched being publicly humiliated. Kimball didn't wait for Ellison to answer. He turned on his heel, fixing Prescott with a stare so cold it seemed to drain the color from the senior partner's face. Prescott had been rooted in place, his expression twisted somewhere between horror and disbelief, watching his world tilt sideways in real time. His mouth opened once, but nothing coherent came out. Kimball didn't give him time to recover. His voice rang out in the lobby with a harsh authority that dared anyone to interrupt. "Calvin," he snapped, voice cracking like a whip. "Do you have any idea who you just tried to throw out of here?" Prescott stammered, his face flushing beet red as his gaze flicked from Kimball to Ellison and back again. I didn't realize." Kimball cut him off with a dismissive, furious wave. "Of course you didn't. Because you didn't bother to read the memo I sent you personally last week. The one with his name on it in bold, underlined, highlighted for your convenience." Prescott's mouth worked uselessly, his eyes darting around the lobby for help that wasn't coming. His junior bankers were staring at their shoes or their monitors now, suddenly engrossed in anything but the meltdown happening in front of them. Kimball didn't let up. He advanced a step toward Prescott, his finger jabbing the air between them. "Mr. Tate here is representing an international conglomerate that's bringing in the biggest single partnership this branch has ever seen. $6.3 billion. Locked in. Signed. Waiting for a single courtesy meeting to finalize it." Prescott visibly paled, his eyes dropping to the floor, his shoulders hunching as if trying to shrink away from the words. Kimball didn't lower his voice. If anything, he let it rise, ensuring everyone in the building heard every humiliating word. "And you treated him like a criminal. You mocked him. You had him escorted out." He paused for just a breath, voice low with venom. "You might have single-handedly cost this bank the deal of a decade." A shocked gasp rippled through the lobby, a wave of whispers rising and falling like a sudden breeze through grass. Prescott tried again to speak, voice breaking with desperation. Ellison's steps were slow but steady, each one deliberate, each one a statement that he wasn't going to slink away. As they passed the receptionist's desk, she actually rose slightly from her chair, mouth opening to say something before thinking better of it, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Kimball led him back toward the sleek meeting rooms he'd been denied access to earlier, pausing only once to turn on his heel and fix Calvin Prescott with an ice-cold glare that seemed to pin the man in place like an insect on a board. Prescott hadn't moved since the confrontation. His once smug face was drained of all color, mouth slack, eyes darting between Ellison, Kimball, and the watching staff, realizing too late that the walls had finally closed in on him. As Kimball reached the glass doors of the conference suite, he turned to one of the junior bankers still frozen behind their desk. His voice was low, but sharp enough to slice through the tense air. "Send word to corporate," Kimball ordered. "Right now. Prescott is suspended effective immediately, pending a full review." The banker jolted, fingers fumbling over his keyboard as he nodded frantically. Prescott made a small, strangled noise in his throat, lurching forward a step. "Robert, wait, this isn't necessary. We can talk about this." Kimball didn't even turn to look at him. His voice stayed calm and even, but had the finality of a death sentence. "Save it. You're done here." He turned back to Ellison, offering a formal nod of apology as he gestured toward the open conference room. "Please, after you." Ellison hesitated just long enough to look over his shoulder, meeting Prescott's glassy, panic-stricken eyes one last time. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Then he stepped inside. As the door swung closed behind them, the lobby erupted in a flurry of hushed voices and frantic calls. Word spread through the bank like wildfire. Prescott stood rooted to the spot, breathing hard, his face a mask of horror as junior associates carefully skirted around him like he was radioactive. Outside, the sun beat down on the city, oblivious to the storm gathering inside Prescott and Meyer Wealth Management. Within hours, corporate headquarters had issued an official statement confirming Prescott's suspension and promising a full internal investigation into discriminatory practices. They fell over themselves to express regret to Ellison, offering public and private apologies, and pledging that he would have every resource and courtesy necessary to finalize the deal. But the damage was already done. News of the humiliating episode broke fast, picked up by local financial blogs, and then national media outlets hungry for the story of a bank that had turned away a $6.3 billion deal out of sheer prejudice and arrogance. The headlines were brutal. Wealth management firm loses billion-dollar partnership after racial profiling disaster. Images of the grand lobby, the name Prescott and Meyer etched in brass, were plastered alongside biting editorials about systemic bias in the finance industry. Interviews cropped up with customers vowing to close their accounts. Activists pointed to it as yet another example of entrenched discrimination that money alone couldn't whitewash away. As the hours turned to days, Prescott found himself a pariah. Former allies in the firm refused to return his calls. His desk was cleared out under supervision, personal effects delivered to him in a cardboard box, while security watched. The firm's leadership scrambled to contain the fallout, announcing sweeping anti-discrimination training and internal reforms designed to show the world they were taking it seriously. Too little, too late for their reputation. Inside the boardroom, Ellison sat across from Kimball and a team of suddenly very respectful executives who nodded earnestly at his every word, their pens scribbling frantic notes, as he laid out the terms of the partnership he'd brought with him all along. They offered coffee. The firm overhauled its internal policies, hired a new director of diversity initiatives, and even began sponsoring local programs for underrepresented entrepreneurs, desperate to scrub away the stain of the incident that had become synonymous with their name. Meanwhile, Ellison Tate had kept going. He finalized the $6.3 billion partnership under his own terms, with the bank's executive team meeting every condition he set. He refused their attempts to smooth it over with perks or public photo ops, treating the deal as purely business, without the slightest hint of gratitude for their eventual cooperation. Word spread about him in financial circles, not just as the man who exposed a bank's racism, but as the operator who stayed calm when others lost their heads, who knew exactly how to wield leverage without theatrics. He became a quiet example of how to be relentless without needing to be loud. But while Ellison moved forward, Calvin Prescott disappeared from the public eye, forced to resign fully after the internal review. His reputation was in tatters. Former colleagues didn't return calls. Recruiters avoided him. His LinkedIn was a graveyard of outdated accolades no one believed anymore. He tried consulting, but no clients would take the risk. The name Calvin Prescott was poison. In truth, Calvin had deserved that fall. He knew it. He replayed the day in the bank lobby over and over, hearing the crack in his own voice when he realized the truth, seeing the look in Ellison's eyes as he was let out. The disgust, the heartbreak, the absolute refusal to beg. That haunted him worse than any news headline. And it followed him to the community event that winter, hosted in the basement of a local rec center, where small businesses gathered to share resources and mentorship. Calvin came in quietly, no suit this time. Just a rumpled flannel shirt and old jeans, nothing like the power suits he'd once used like armor. He hesitated at the door, clutching the flyer that had brought him there, unsure if he'd even be let in. When he finally worked up the nerve to enter, his eyes swept the crowded room and landed on Ellison across the floor, seated at a folding table with a group of young entrepreneurs. Ellison was explaining something to them with his steady, calm authority, gesturing to a spreadsheet projected onto the wall, helping them understand cash flow modeling without a hint of condescension. He looked up once, eyes scanning the room, and saw Calvin standing there frozen. Their eyes met. For a long second, neither man moved. Ellison's expression didn't change. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just waited. Calvin felt his throat close up, the words he'd rehearsed in his car disappearing under the weight of Ellison's gaze. He forced his feet to move anyway. When he reached the table, the small group fell silent, sensing the tension. Calvin's eyes burned, tears threatening as he tried to speak. His voice cracked. "Mr. Tate," he managed, shame turning his face blotchy red. "Ellison, please. I was wrong. About everything. I want to change." Silence stretched between them like a wire ready to snap. Ellison set down the marker he'd been using, folding his hands calmly on the table. He didn't look away. He didn't let Calvin off the hook with a quick answer. He just watched him squirm. Around them, the young entrepreneurs waited, eyes wide, unsure if they were about to witness a fight or something else. Calvin swallowed hard. "I didn't see you. I didn't try. I thought I knew everything about you the second you walked in. I thought I was better. And I destroyed everything. Not just for me, for the whole bank, for the people who needed that deal." His voice shook. "I can't take it back. But I want to be better. I'm trying to learn. I'm listening. Please, tell me how." The quiet was deafening. Ellison didn't move for a moment. Then he finally exhaled and leaned back slightly in his chair. His face remained calm, but his voice held a note of gravity that filled the room. "Then start by listening," he said evenly. "That's how real deals get made. Not by who you think someone is. By hearing them. By respecting them. Even when they don't look like you. Even when they don't talk like you." Calvin nodded frantically, blinking away tears, shoulders sagging in relief and remorse. Ellison's gaze softened by a fraction, enough to let him speak without breaking. "If you're willing to learn, there's room here," he said, gesturing to the table. "But you don't get to lead anymore. You get to help." And for the first time in a long while, Calvin Prescott understood what that meant. He pulled out a chair and sat. The end. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an update. I'd also love to hear what you think about the plot. Did the ending resonate with you? Do you think Calvin truly deserved a second chance? Or should Ellison have walked away for good? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And tell me, where in the world are you watching or reading from today? Let's keep the conversation going.